Never again, Starfighters. 4 episodes in 1 month. I don't know how people like Linkara and Leon Thomas do it. I suppose to be fair, I have a more physically intensive day job than they do. Actually, I have a day job, period. Did that come across as insulting? Ah, screw it. I was too tired to shave before this video, so clearly I'm too tired to... Whatever. The Vampire Happening. Next movie. Go ahead and write your own M. Night Shyamalan jokes, because, I'm going to be honest, I've never actually seen The Happening. I really only know about the memes. I haven't seen an M. Night Shyamalan movie in years, and, I will say I actually think Lady in the Water is underrated. Even with the whole kind of self-insert problem with it. I think you take that out, you got yourself a solid fairy tale, and, hold on. Oh, that feels better. Okay. Yes, The Vampire Happening from 1970... I can't tell with the sunglasses on, but I just have such a headache right now. Okay. One thing's for sure. No more 4 episodes in 1 month bullshit. Not doing that again.
Alright, so here we are with 1971's The Vampire Happening. Yeah, it was 71. With the sunglasses on, it kind of looked like 74, but I wasn't sure. Plot summary, courtesy of Letterboxd, which is pretty much word for word the same as the back of the DVD. Turns out there's not much complexity to this movie's plot. An American actress inherits a castle in Transylvania. What she doesn't know is that her ancestor, the Baroness Catali, was in actuality a vampire countess and emerges from her tomb to ravage the nearby village and Catholic seminary. So, when I went to Letterboxd to log this movie in my film diary, I saw something that filled me with dread. It was the tagline, or at least one of the taglines for this movie. The adult vampire sex comedy. Oh boy. You all may remember from back in season 2 that I am not fond of sex comedies. I mean, Spring Break was a pleasant surprise, but that's an exception rather than a rule. This did not fill me with confidence. But what about the movie, you may be asking? Was it closer to Spring Break or closer to The Beach Girls? Well, let me go ahead and get deeper into the film and see if you can figure out my feelings before I say them. We open on people, including children, watching softcore porn on a plane?
What?
Well, didn't think I'd get any excuse to use that clip again so soon. And it looks like the actress in the film is on the plane herself. I'm guessing this is our protagonist for the movie. And she just scratched the super stereotypically gay male flight attendant. For no apparent reason. And, oh boy, I mean super stereotypical. As in, with one line, he's already the most homophobic character of this entire series. We are not off to a good start. We go from there to a title sequence that looked like someone wanted to do a rip-off of the opening to the Pink Panther, but couldn't afford an actual animator. And apparently Dracula's in this movie as well, but given his total absence from the plot summaries I've read, I imagine he's going to be about as effective as the Dracula in Blood of Castle Dracula, which is to say not very. After the credits, our protagonist, Betty is her name by the way, drives up to the castle and a boulder shaped like a six-sided die just rolls into frame randomly. Ah, for fuck's sake, is this going to be one of those comedies that mistakes just shoving in random nonsense for humor? That's not what absurdism means. Oh, and a tree falls over for no apparent reason. This is dismissed so quickly that I'll honestly be surprised if it comes up later again as a plot point. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. We meet a frightened dude who mistakes Betty for someone named Claremondi, so I guess this is another movie where the protagonist and antagonist are played by the same actor. At least I'm finding this out now, before I make an ass of myself while recording. Yada yada, clumsy exposition, Betty is actually her stage name, but I'm just going to keep calling her that anyway, and one of the doors in the house is shaped like a coffin lid. Nobody tell Maven of the Eventide about that, she might start a GoFundMe. Anyway, we get nudity in the movie in the form of a painting. So, do I use the time to tits counter on that one? I mean, it is a painting of the lead actress of the film. Not of Betty, but of the Countess, Claremonde. I'm certain that makes sense. We jump cut to Betty being shown the castle's torture chamber. And she appears to hallucinate a naked woman being tortured on the rack. A sex comedy, folks. But it's funny, see, because the guy turning the wheel on the rack is eating a banana while he does it. Oh, it's not a hallucination, just Betty's imagination. We know this because when the guy giving the tour shows her the thumb screws, she envisions herself, dressed like her ancestor, putting the gay flight attendant through the thumb screw. You know, I imagine you might be thinking that the movie's going to explain this later as like some kind of subtle psychic influence from her ancestor, who we already know is actually alive and a vampire from the plot summary. But if you don't know that, what you are seeing at this point in the movie is the supposed hero of the film casually fantasizing about putting random people, or at least random as far as we know, as the only one we've seen before as the flight attendant, through medieval tortures for no reason. If that is the case, they didn't include it in the movie. She just really seems to be that awful. And again, this is supposed to be a sex comedy. But hey, we got jokes! Betty is listening to the radio, and the announcer, who talks like a Lugosi-style vampire, announces that the Transylvania blood bank is low, and would all potential donors go to a Dr. Franklin Stein. Ha. 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 Christ, and I thought Dracula Dead and Loving It was bad. Later, Betty flashes a monk at a seminary that is apparently really close to the castle, but we didn't see it when she was driving up. Classy. And the sequence goes on for almost 2 minutes. Not uninterrupted, but still. This is what passes for comedy in this movie. I'm starting to get my mom's a werewolf flashbacks. What follows is a sequence of the monk who was flashed, going for a walk in the woods, and hallucinating sex stuff everywhere. This includes a tree spreading its 2 large branches like legs. I assure you, it is actually dumber than I'm describing it. This goes on for a while, but I will spare you the details. I know that shared pain is lessened pain, but I actually would like you to keep watching this show after the episode is over. And for the record, the scene doesn't get any better when Betty shows up for real. Yeah, honestly, a significant chunk of this movie could be described as Betty tries to seduce X. Look, filmmakers, if you wanted to make a porno, just make a porno. It'd be more honest. And, frankly, probably funnier. So, for reasons, Betty goes and opens the sealed crypt of her ancestor, Claremonde, and she sees Claremonde intact despite having been dead for about 100 years, and also breathing. Betty does manage to look shocked. Eventually. Delayed reaction much? But yeah, the vampire lady is awake and out now, so at least the plot is finally moving along. Moving right along to Betty getting dressed up to meet the monk. Lady, did you not just see your allegedly long-dead ancestor going through REM sleep? What is wrong with you? Of course, the monk ends up being Claremonde's first new victim. I'd say you probably guessed that, but I remembered I actually skipped over a few scenes. Though if you had guessed it anyway, well, hey, you're pretty smart. Smart unlike Betty, who insists that there are no vampires, even when her perfectly preserved ancestor's body goes missing and the monk turns up dead with 2 holes in his neck. Should I use another clip joke so soon after the last one? Yeah, why not?
Stupid! You're so stupid!
The housekeeper, that scared guy from earlier, his name is Joseph, hides the monk's body so they won't be accused of his murder. Or, since Claremonde has climbed back into her crypt to get some sleep, you could just stake her. But that would make too much sense. And Betty will still not believe she was a vampire. I mention all of this because if I don't, the next awful scene I'm going to describe won't make any sense. At the monk's funeral, while the priest is speaking, the young monks and the Catholic schoolgirls from a neighboring seminary basically start eye-humping each other. Yet another example of this movie's comedy. Well, let me put it to you this way. The one laugh that I had during the first 35 minutes of the movie came from something that wasn't even a joke, but rather an effects fail, as the camera managed to capture the parts of the frame where the artificial rain wasn't falling. Either the rain rig was too small, or the camera was too far back. Well, I suppose it could have been both. Along the way, we get an unearned and unfunny fourth wall gag. Just like My Mom's a Werewolf. Ugh. And then... okay, you know what, fuck it. If I list all the failed jokes in this movie, we'd be here all day. Like I said on Twitter, calling this the kind of vampire movie that Doug Walker would make would actually be unfair to Doug Walker. More shenanigans at the Catholic seminary/school nearby that I don't give a fuck about, more nudity, and the priest spying on naked girls with a telescope. Yikes. You know, maybe in 1971 that might have worked as a gag, but I am watching this in 2019, and, well, let's be honest, if I'd been watching this in the late 90s, that still would be super problematic. Man, I hate this movie. And it only gets worse when the monk crawls out of his grave as a newborn vampire, who gives us a full view of his ass as he climbs into a window. I am apparently supposed to think that that's funny, but at least the movie's more than half over at this point. Late in the movie, as part of the setup for the last act, Betty receives an invitation to a ball that actually turns out to have been for Claremondi for some vampire convention, and the license plate on Betty's car reads VM-1PR. Ugh. We get to the big vampire party, and honestly, this scene just makes me wish I was watching What We Do in the Shadows instead. Also, considering all the nudity and groping going on here, this movie is the one in the set that really should have been called Vampire's Night Orgy. Just saying. Dracula shows up, and, oh wow, this, I had to screen cap this. It is so shameless. It's not just me who sees it, right? They are totally trying to make him look like Christopher Lee's Dracula. Wow. The utter balls of this movie to try and attach itself to the Hammer canon is as shameless as it is inspiring. Wow. Oh, it gets even better. When Dracula is talking to the host of the party, the host keeps referring to him as Count, because, Count Dracula. To which Count Dracula says, "Call me Christopher." This is funny, but not in the way I think it was intended. The joke, I assume, is, ha, get it? Like Christopher Lee? What I'm laughing at is the sheer gall of this movie to try and put itself in the same class as Christopher Lee's vampire movies. I mean, okay, the one in this set wasn't good, but that was literally his last one of those, and you could kind of tell that he was ready to check out. I'm talking about the prime of the Lee Cushing films. This movie wants to put itself in that weight class, when in reality it's actually not even as good as Count Dracula and his Vampire Bride, and you all presumably remember how I felt about that disappointment. So a bunch of nonsense later, Claremondi helps Betty because of the familial connection between the two. In a better movie, this would have actually been interesting. And then most of the vampires are dead now after Joseph pulls a trick with the clock tower, making everyone think it's earlier than it is. And a mix-up leads to Claremondi getting shipped to L.A., and O Tannenbaum plays over the ending for some reason, and yeah, the fucking end. Random thoughts I had while watching this movie. This film's director has quite the horror pedigree. His filmography, apart from this turkey, containing such memorable films as the 1972 Tales from the Crypt movie and Day of the Triffids. How'd they get him to do this one? I'm guessing it was a do this and we'll fund the movie you actually want to do deals? Oh, maybe the movie that he actually wanted to do was Tales from the Crypt. Okay, if Tales from the Crypt exists because of this movie, that will have made it worth existing. Not worth watching, mind you, just worth existing. I didn't count them, but I think this movie may have more breast shots than any other film in this set so far. Granted, most of them came from just one actress until the big party scene, but still. Final verdict. The short version?
This isn't funny!
Look, I know that most vampire comedies are bad. Brilliant films like What We Do in the Shadows are rare and wonderful exceptions. Seriously, go watch What We Do in the Shadows. But this one is just... I never thought I'd personally see a vampire comedy that was worse than Dracula Dead and Loving It, but here we are. I am seriously tempted to put this under Blood of Dracula's Castle in the rankings. I mean, there is a precedent for me ranking failed comedies below movies with sexual assault in them. Not sure what that says about me as a person. Though, unlike in Warriors of the Wasteland, Blood of Castle of Dracula's was all off-screen, and it was really only implied. Also, both films had something going for them. Over-the-top action in the case of Warriors, and John Carradine in Castle Dracula. This movie, much like the hated My Mom's a Werewolf and the equally hated The Beach Girls, doesn't even manage that much redeeming value. Yeah, fuck it, this one's going at the bottom. I know that there's like 6 movies left in the set, but I have a hard time believing that any of them will manage to top this in terms of just sheer, God, it was so unpleasant to watch, it really was. Next up, a movie called Horror Express. Here's hoping there's a train in it. I like trains.